within his role, that's the precursor here. Within his role, Al Horford's been exceptional this season. Exceptional. You know, for what the Celtics have asked him to do, he's not a top 25 player in the NBA or something like that. I'm not suggesting that you know, somebody give him a new contract for $30 million a year at, you know, age 36 or however old he is at this point. Al Horford, though, the way that they have used him, the way that they have managed his minutes, managed his workload, I mean, he's playing like he's 30. You know, he has turned back the clock, Sean. I know you know this. You've watched him closely. You've written about him very recently. And this is, you know, a constant sort of talking point in some of the text threads that I'm on with friends of mine who are Celtics fans while we're all watching these games. I do wonder what the Celtics, you know, Brad Stevens obviously loves Al Horford, probably still doesn't get enough credit for flipping Kemba for Horford in terms of the, you know, the net both ways, quite frankly,
right,
you know,
right.
what you're losing and what you're gaining. But I wonder what they do with him going forward, given, you know, that looming price tag for him next season. But he fits so damn well.
Yeah, and you know, he's also been really important in what we've seen from Robert Williams. That, you know, getting him back, that's gone a long way toward the development of Robert Williams, the consistency, the lack of the mental mistakes that we used to see. You know, some of the crazy fouls. You know, that a lot of that you've got to give Al credit. He's worked very closely with Robert Williams, so you got to give him some credit for that as well. At the same time, he's due $26.5 million next year. They can say, you know what, we're done. We're going to let you go, Al. And the contract is only guaranteed for $14.5 million. You save that $12 million unless they go to the finals. Then it's $19.5 million, and you know, maybe then at that point it's an easy decision. But you know, that there's a big implication for that $12 million, because that puts them so far over the luxury tax that it gets them up near the luxury tax apron. And what that means is that you've got the $17 million Evan Fournier traded player exception that you can't use. If you're too close to the tax, you cannot go over the apron with the trade exception. So you're not going to be able to use that $17 million if you keep Al Horford. It's going to be very. You can maybe get rid of some other contracts and create a little wiggle room, but you're not going to be able to use that $17 million if you keep Al Horford. The question becomes, though, Adam, who are you going to get with that $17 million? You know, a trade exception is going to get you a Josh Richardson, for instance. It's going to get you a guy who another team is okay with just getting rid of the contract, and you might have to give up, you know, maybe a first-round pick if it's a good player, a second-round pick if it's not a great player. You know, you have to decide then: are you going to get somebody with that TPE who's better than Al, who's going to do better for you than what Al is going to do next year? And I think at the beginning of the year, you know, the answer was probably, yeah, there's no way they're going to guarantee him at $26.5 million for next season. At this point, I don't know. I mean, look who they could possibly get. You know, I mean, who are you going to bring in at this point who's going to have a bigger impact for what you're doing than what Al Horford is? You know, just by using a traded player. Except I think it's a much bigger question now than it was even a few months ago, to the point where, you know, you talk to people around the league and they think, yeah, you know, he's probably sticking around. You know, that he's too much to that team to just let him go.
Getting under
what would you do?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say, because I think the way you presented it is exactly right, which is you have to look at it and say, is player X better for us than Al Horford? I think ultimately that's what it's going to come down to with whomever it is that could spring available. I think part of it too, and it sounds like a cop-out, I realize, but we just, you know, short of like Zach LaVine, who's constantly being talked about as someone who could be on the move next year, we don't really have a sense of, you know, what stars, borderline stars, could be looking for a change, or teams that could be, you know, looking to move them. So it's just, you know, forecasting right now that becomes very difficult.
Yeah, but I mean, you can look at, like I said, you can look at that $17 million that you could possibly have,
right?
And understanding that it's just an it's just a traded player acceptance. So you're not giving up anything. You're just taking back somebody. And the caliber of players that teams are going to be willing to just give up to you or to do a sign and trade so they can get their own, sort of like what happened with Evan Fournier. Yep. It's not going to be great. I mean, you could get, say, Robert Covington. Is he really going to be better than Al Horford, though? If you really watched Robert Covington over this year, he was terrible. He was not the player that you would have thought of, 3-4 years ago. But that's the kind of guy that you're looking at. And at some point you have to say, not just on the floor. Obviously, there is, like you mentioned, Al's been great on the floor, but the off the floor stuff too that he brings. Culture-wise, is it going to really be beneficial to let him go, even if it's and look, it's not our $26 million, so it's easy for us to sit here and say, but it's just it's hard to see where that's going to be a benefit to the Celtics in the end, where they're going to be able to get anybody, because like I say, the PPA is you're giving up nothing for something, and if you're giving up nothing, then you're probably not going to, like I said, Josh Richardson was the guy that got last year. That's the caliber of guy that we're talking about. I don't know that there's a guy out there that's going to make me think, let's get rid of Al Horford and bring in this guy.
But continuing in the spirit of, hey, it's not our money. I know that, something that was really painful to a lot of Celtics fans over the course of, last offseason and into this year around the trade deadline. And, because nobody at that time envisioned this team becoming a contender, obviously, which certainly it has at this point. I certainly didn't foresee any of this happening, especially going back to the early months of the season under Ime and the way these guys were clicking and lack of buy-in and all of that. We don't need to relive it because it was so painful, obviously. But one of the things that was hard was, there was this sort of, looming question of, is ownership willing to pay into the tax for a contender? They've always said they are. Well, now you have a team that very clearly, regardless of what does end up happening this year, you have the pieces to be a contender. Are they going to be willing to spend into the tax, even if it means, hey, it doesn't work out and the next year they got to revert course and, get back under? Fine. Like, that's a problem for future Wick and Pags and all those guys. Right. Do you think that, this coming off season into next year, they'll be willing to get a little fiscally uncomfortable in order to, get to banner whatever number it is if 18 comes this year,
Yeah, I think they put themselves in a position where they almost have to. If you look at the way things are structured right now, unless you're going to give up Marcus Smart, unless you're not going to extend or give a new deal to Jaylen Brown when he's up in 2 years, unless you're not going to give an extension to Grant Williams, who I think has probably earned himself a decent contract, certainly in the last 4 months or so, then that's the only way you're going to avoid the luxury tax. Other than that, you're in it. And I think it's, we saw this at the trade deadline this year, where I think what they were doing at the trade deadline this year by trying to get under that tax is avoiding the repeater tax. You don't want to be over and over in the tax, then you get some real severe penalties. So I think they were avoiding the tax this year in order to say, okay, we're going to be in the tax next year, and then we'll deal with it from there. And I think that's the situation that they're in. And that does go back to Al Horford. You're going to have his $26 million on the books this year. And it comes off after that. You can still sign him, at a reasonable number, whether it's a more of a mid-range deal, $5-6 million a year, whatever it is. But you do get some relief there as you start to get into the extension for Robert Williams, for Grant Williams, for these other contracts you're going to have to pay. But I think there's an acknowledgement that they're going to have to be in the tax next season, and that's one of the reasons that they tried so hard to get under the tax in February at the trade deadline.